Please welcome Federation Board Member Ben Abram.
Hi, my name is Ben Abram, and as the voice of God said, I'm a board member here of our federation. I moved to the Bay Area from North Carolina 9 years ago, and I just want to say it's y'all have welcomed me so warmly, and it's a treat to be here. From 1988 to 2011, Jeff Swartz was the third generation CEO of his family business, a little boot company called Timberland. He oversaw the decisive broadening of the company, transforming it into an iconic global brand. As CEO, Jeff made corporate social responsibility a centerpiece of his leadership. It is not enough, he wrote in the year 2000, for Timberland to make the absolute best boots or shoes or clothing in the world. We recognize we must also serve. Everything we do, everything we sell has an impact on the communities in which we live and work. Not at all coincidentally, at the same time, Jeff became a passionate philanthropist, both to Jewish and non-Jewish causes, such as Harlem Children's Zone, Teach for America, or Share Our Strength, the nation's second largest anti-hunger organization. Jeff served as a seed stage philanthropic investor or national board member for these organizations and plenty of others. Notably, from his earliest days as CEO, Jeff began what has come to be a life-shaping, intensive immersion in Jewish study. Jeff follows the Daf Yomi, which is a disciplined study calendar of the Talmud, ingesting a page a day, every day, a lot of Hebrew, over a 7.5-year cycle. He's now mid-course in his fourth such tour through our canon. And as a result, when he's not wearing his philanthropist hat, or maybe when he is, he's a real expert in rabbinical questions. Indeed, many of his grantees and partners look to him as their Rav. Jeff's Jewish studies and his evolving philanthropic practice have grown symbiotically. In recent years, he's been laser-focused on social justice in Israel and improving the prospects of her next generation. Splitting his time between Boston and Jerusalem, Jeff created Maos, a breakout nonprofit umbrella fund devoted to pluralism and democracy in Israel. Please join me in welcoming to San Francisco a cherished friend and mentor and a friend of our Bay Area Jewish community whose devotion to repairing the world can be an inspiration to us all. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Schwartz.
When Ben invited me to rise to the honor of speaking with the leaders of San Francisco's Jewish community, it felt like a good and fair and challenging challenge. This is a unique community Jewishly, a place where the two passions of my life, land of Israel and the Jewish people, attract a lot of energy. And San Francisco is billed as cold fusion in a soda bottle, the energy source for disrupting the status quo. And I work hard as a social change agent to disrupt what is, for me, an unsatisfying Jewish status quo. And that's what I'm going to talk about, but I need to say, because I sat and listened to the love for the honorees and to the joy that the honorees bring to the table, I got to qualify. I believe what I'm going to say to you. I believe it in my bones. But I am challenged in a best positive way by the loving smile of the leaders who stand forward after generation and generation and say, here I am. And so please accept these words in that context, because I didn't know the story of the honorees until I heard the story of the honorees. And I have it in my heart as I say these things to you. I thought it was a pretty energizing invitation for an unemployed former boot salesman. I got plenty of time, so a chance to come to San Francisco and not get yelled at by the Nordstrom's guys, that to me is a useful invitation. So And if so, if you're going to come to San Francisco and you're going to be with the leaders of the Jewish community, it can't be as bad as one of those sales meetings. So, okay, what if you dare to have a conversation about what appears to be the rather extraordinary failures of Jewish leadership which abound in this generation? What about talking with the leaders of San Francisco's Jewish community about the pain of those failures? And could you imagining with them a way to move forward from failure to a more inspiring Jewish future? It's ironic, but when Ben talked to me about this privilege and opportunity is kind of like 9 months ago, and it turns out that our oldest son and his wife are having a conversation about the future of the Jewish people. And so I'm keeping my phone on vibrate because any moment now, our first grandchild is due to appear in the air of the world back in Boston. Yeah, a new generation, right around the new year, 5777 in the Jewish tradition. It's for me a good and important and even an urgent time to think and maybe even to dare to act together on behalf of the vulnerable idea of the Jewish people. We don't need research studies to confirm this vulnerability. We know that in this generation, we've raised Jews who are broadly illiterate Jewishly. That way too many Jews, young Jews in America, have little or no common cause with the Jewish Democratic State of Israel. That way too many of our cousins and our kids value their birthright little more than a free 10 days of adventure in Israel. And even before looming grandparenthood reinforced to me this notion of the obligation of the generations to the generations, I knew, in a way I bet you know too in your bones, that, given that the day is short and the tasks are abundant, the urgent challenge of reanimating Jewish peoplehood in America stands squarely before you and me and us. We who say we're the philanthropic and civic leaders of this very challenged Jewish world in America. So I've been asking myself, if my grandchild decides to grow up in America, what kind of Jewish world would I want him or her to experience? Visioning is an important exercise. It was a key part of how I built the brand and the business at Timberland. And it's a central part of how I push and try to help social change agents as a philanthropist these days. I tell them, if you want to drive real change, if you really want to change the way the world operates, you have to be able to tell a compelling story, not about the world you're in, but about the world you want to live in. If you can't describe that new world, why is anyone going to follow you and the back-breaking hard work it takes to build that world? So I wonder what you think of this vision for my grandchild. Jewishly, I want my grandchild's world in America to be very different than the world I see around us. In that new world, Jews will not be described as the people of the book. They'll actually have read the book. I'm not talking about religious practice. I'm not talking about faith. No, but I am saying that in my grandchild's Jewish America, Jews will have read Shakespeare and be able to quote his poetry, and they'll have read the Bible and be able to quote King David's poetry. A new world in which socially engaged American Jews will study Aristotle, because if you want to understand democratic principles, you've got to look at the original source texts. But Jews should also have looked at what the Rambam has to say about how civic organizations Jewishly should operate, where politically you've read the Federalist Papers, but you've also been exposed to what Herzl or Jabotinsky or Ahad Ha'am had to say. That's our tradition as Jews. And I dream about a Jewish America where engaged Jews are literate that way. I want our grandchild's world to be a world in which the Jews are just literate Jewishly. Because literate Jews create a richer social, civic reality, first for themselves, but not only for themselves. As you said so powerfully, we bring our passion into the world and we influence the ideas and the ideals of Western liberal democracy. But we bring into the civic square our beliefs. It's not enough to quote the pasuk of pursuit of justice. It's important to contextualize that it is a particular Jewish value that animates those words. And when we bring that particular value into the broader civic square, we add to the civic square. We don't insist on our truth, but we bring our truth. We can't bring a truth that we don't know. In my grandchild's world, In that grandchild's world, I want the Jews. I'm going to work hard on this, and I need your help. I need the Jews to relearn the central discursive methodology of Jewish thought. Machloket Shem Shemayim, a dispute, a search for truth that's based in a truth that's not I'm right and you're wrong, but a pursuit of truth that is in fact that, a willingness to risk all in the pursuit of truth. This is the heart of the Jewish wisdom tradition. 1st century BCE, Hillel and Shammai, they personify in the pages of the Talmud this notion of how to dispute. The Talmud says that 300 odd times the schools that are named after these two disputants, these two principal people with a point of view that says, I have the truth, and the other guy says, no, I have the truth, and they dispute. In Eruvin, in the second Eruvin, it says, after 3 years of debate on this very interesting issue that we don't need to talk about, a voice from heaven calls down and says something fascinating. This one believes his truth, and this one believes his truth, and both of them are the truth. And they're not shades of gray. This one says left, and this one says right. This one says black, and this one says white. Elu ve'elu, these and those are the words of the living God. How can diametrically opposite truths be true? That's beyond the human pay grade. But the voice says both of these truths are truths of all, but we need to run our business. We have to govern our society. And so the halacha, the rules, the way we'll live normatively follows this fellow named Hillel. Why is that? Why is it every single time Shammai and Hillel hook it up, the rule is, listen to the debate, but you know what the answer is in the end. The halacha is by Beit Hillel. Why? The Gemara says because he was polite. Polite's not a bad thing. What does it mean polite? He let the other guy go first. Interesting. Take a look at the text. Every time you see these disputations, Shammai's point of view is presented first. It's a little bit like two fat guys going through the door. After you. No, okay, fine, after you. So Shammai goes to the door and says, here's what I think. It doesn't say, here's what I think, here's what I believe, this is my truth. Hillel says, I heard you, here's my truth. And the halacha is by Hillel. It's not politesse that makes the halacha by Hillel. You know why the halacha is by Hillel? The normative Jewish governance is by Hillel because he didn't let the other guy go first to be polite. He let the other guy go first because he actually wanted to hear what he had to say. He was convinced of the truth of his own point of view, but not blindly convinced of it. He thought with humility that the other person had something to say. Look at the Jewish world we've prepared for our children's children. Look around us. That's not characterized by this form of dignified and generative struggle for truth. It's not. The Jewish world is instead characterized in America by noxious, repulsive, ungoverned, hateful, polarizing rhetoric from sanctioned bullies who spew venom from the left and from the right at each other, not interested in right, interested in their right. These Jewish voices which we somehow tolerate, create a moral eclipse that darkens the sky and makes it nearly impossible for the generative debate the Jewish community desperately needs if we're going to create a richer, more powerful, and sustainable common good. The inability to disagree in pursuit of a common good shows up as a key barrier in the relationship between Israel and the Jews of the world. American Jews don't visit Israel, but that doesn't keep them from pronouncing about the way the government should operate. And it's okay. Israelis sit in Israel and are sure that they understand what it means to be a minority struggling in a great democracy over 300 years. They have no clue what you as American Jews are experiencing any more than the vast majority of American Jews have any sense at all of Israel. But that doesn't keep everybody from shouting at each other. And so what ought to be, and what has got to become a generative discussion between brothers, disputing, loving brothers, instead devolves into a polemic wasteland. You've got American Jews calling for the delegitimization of Israel, and you've got other American Jews calling for the delegitimization of those who want to argue against Israel. That is not the world I want my grandchild to grow up in. I want his world, or hers, to be a loving world, a Jewish world led by siblings. Look, I heard you talking about your family. This is a city of family. You don't have to be here for the 3 days I've been to see how this notion of generations isn't just an archetypal thing. It's a big, profound thing. Look, I don't know what it's like in your family, but I know in my family, brothers disagree. They can absolutely fight for their truth, but in the end, and in the beginning, they love each other. Because that's the relationship that we need to create between the Jews of America and the Jews of Israel. We have to have a conversation that says, not, you can't criticize me any more than you can say, I'm not willing to deal with you. There has to be a loving relationship. That's the world I want for my grandchild. And finally, the Jews, this is a good line. I don't want to miss this one. I worked hard on this. This is a good one, really. I'm going to go back. It says, I want his world to be a Jewish world led by loving siblings, one in the land of Israel, one in America. Here's the good part. Brothers, in an active relationship of authenticity and love and intimacy and struggle. Here's the good line. Because America is an imperfect society, and so is Israel. And both places need stronger moral leadership in order to achieve their destiny. And the Jews have a role to play in both places in perfecting both societies, but that role can only be exercised constructively if it's rooted in love for each other, not in a determined, self-destructive dance of demonization and fratricide. Finally, in our grandchild's world, imagine that the birthright of every Jew is a birthright valued intimately and consciously and viscerally. For millennia, one of the chief competencies of the Jewish people is we've known what to die for. Is it not time to have a conversation about what's worth living for? So this is a crazy vision. A world where literate Jews are engaged in the broad world, fighting for not their answer, but for right, in a way that loves and embraces different points of views, connected in a loving, informed, and authentic way to the land of Israel. Jews with a strong sense of their Jewish identity and a clear sense of Jewish purpose and value. Is that a fantasy? Look, I have the advantage, and some of the other speakers said it too, I get to see you. You get stuck looking at me. I get to look at you, and I think to myself, no, the answer is staring you in the face, Jeff. Look how many people, I was saying this week, look how many people gave up some part of an otherwise productive day. There could be 15 disruptive startups started this afternoon by this group of people, but you're sitting in here eating a delicious pseudo-kosher lunch, and I think to myself, it can't be a fantasy. Not given the honorees, as powerful as they are, not given the strength and generosity of all you seated here, it can't be, right? With the strength and creativity and power that's here assembled, our Jewish world has got to be rebuildable, and you are those who have to do the rebuilding. Personal accountability for saving the world is a fundamental Jewish value, right? In Pirkei Avot, the same Hillel I said before says something really profound and kind of obvious to all of you who do it, which is in a place where there is no leadership, or in a place where the leadership model is incomplete, or where there's pain civically, what's called upon us? Join another board. No, what we're called on is to lead. Pirkei Avot says, in a place where there are no leaders, strive to be a leader. Dare, stand up, be counted. Rebuilding the Jewish world is, here's a really big insight, the responsibility of Jewish leaders. Now you say, that's impressive, not particularly insightful, Jeff, but I say to you with respect now, turn around for a second and take a look at this room, and you will see the same two truths that I see. This eye cries with joy that you are here, and this eye cries with sadness. Why? Because the vast majority of American Jews see their personal responsibility for the Jewish world differently than you do. Who are they? I don't know. They're not here today. And while Jewish philanthropy in America is hugely powerful, the top 100 gifts every year philanthropically come from Jews. We know how little of that philanthropy is going to the Jews from the Jews. And so I say with love and sadness, you who stand up for the Jewish people in San Francisco are rare, too rare, bold, not bold enough, unusual, we'll leave it at that, philanthropic leaders. Don't hear me being disrespectful of Jewish investments made to strengthen Western liberal democracy. I've made those investments with patriotic pride. And I want my grandchild to grow up in a world where America reasserts moral authority in a challenging world. 300,000 dead Syrians, that's not the world that I want my grandchild growing up in. You won't hear tikkun olam or never again out of my mouth. I don't use phrases like that because I can't live up to them. You can't say never again and keep marching along. You can't say tikkun olam and walk by the homeless in the city. If you say it, you own it, and so I ain't gonna say it. But I want my grandchild to grow up in a world where America asserts moral authority. But Jews are a small people in a big world, and if we will not invest as leaders of our time and our money in the Jewish people, no one else will. If you look at the list of the symphony, and I'm a supporter, the Jewish names on the list of the symphony, they are there with pride, and they belong there with pride. So are the non-Jewish names. But when you foot the list the other way, none of the non-Jewish names are supporting, and they shouldn't be, the building of a Jewish presence in San Diego, Seattle, or St. Louis. Only the Jews. And so it's not don't be on that list. It's just make sure you're on this list as a first priority, and it ain't so broadly. That's not your issue, but that is our issue. You're Jewish philanthropists. Your friends are wonderful people. I love them. You love them. It's like Barney on Channel 2. But it's not good enough. Okay, first, Jews need to invest money. Jewish philanthropists must give Jewishly in San Francisco as you do, and as in general, they don't. But the problem is deeper, because you know that money is only part of the rebuilding of a worthy Jewish world. At the heart of a more inspiring Jewish world in America sits who? Not me. At the heart of a more inspiring world sits Jewish social change agents who are ready to build inspiring new ideas that will capture hearts and minds and souls. And we need it desperately because, well, the facts stare us in the face. These change leaders need us. Yes, they need our money, but they need our time, they need our experience, they need our personalities. They need the hardest gift to give, they need our mentorship. The hardest investment any philanthropist can make, to take from the treasury of your experience and skill. Reimagining the American Jewish world calls for capacity builders. You are they. It cries out for mentors for the change agents. I mean, you will sit with them in chevruta and sweat chin on chin, listening to the lonely leader trying to figure out, how do you do this? Can this be done? It demands board members who are willing to govern. 1 board, 2 board, 10 board. Why is it that we have so few leaders of this caliber who are able to sit on boards, and not because they deserve the seat on the board, but because they're actually willing to do the work of governing these change agents? I have love. Strange term, but I learned it from Jason and Benji. I have love and respect and appreciation for each Jewish lay leader in San Francisco who invests in the Jews and in every exceptional Jewish professional, starting with you, who serves the community here. You are gifted with vision. You have to be. You're either absolutely blinded by the light, like the Springsteen song, or you can see from here forever, like the Eagles song. You can see that even while Pew's scathing criticisms sit right in our laps, paradoxically in the very same moment, you know that the conditions are very ripe for philanthropists who will to build a richer Jewish San Francisco. You can tell by now I'm no optimist, but I assert to you I am an empiricist. I see the truth of Pew wherever I travel with this eye, but I also find in every corner in Israel and all across America, men and women with a passionate belief that the Jewish people have something worthy to say in modernity, first to each other, but then to the broader world around us. A Jewish message, a Jewish story, Jewish ideas important enough to learn and engage and teach. This isn't a surprise. This is the story of Jewish renewal through the ages. Forever as a people, somehow. What's renewable? In seismic terms, I don't know. I can show you the solar energy arrays. I can show you all the renewable energies, but there's no more precious renewable energy than this Meshuggah group of young leaders that come around every generation that say, if you'll give me space, love, resource, and challenge, I could lead. I have an innovative idea. I dare to make for a better future. These nascent leaders are the keepers of the light. The focusers of the light. They are the builders of the light. They are those who can re-illuminate the dark corners of the Jewish world. They are the ones who can reconnect Jews to their own story, their own narrative, and their own values. And ultimately, these change agents are the ones who can shine light from the Jewish nation in San Francisco to the whole world around them. Who are these leaders? They are not by and large sitting in positions of power in the organized Jewish world today. They are innovators from the outside, disruptors. And this sounds great. This is San Francisco innovation. Disruption means, like, did you get in on the first round? But this is harder because they have new ideas, ideas that threaten sometimes in a scary way the large and too largely inert structures that dominate too much of the Jewish landscape. White elephant shoals that clog up communal balance sheets or dated organizations that are more about the annual golf tournament, about the social change that they're supposed to be about. San Francisco is bursting with leaders of ora v'simcha, of light and joy. You don't have to be a genius to see what's going on here. The creators of the Mission Minion, the Urban Adamah crowd, the agenda pushers at Zionism 3.0, the young disruptors running Moishe House here and in so many other cities all over the world, and the quiet ones that you really got to keep your eyes open for, the young connectors who are baking challah and hosting rolling and roiling Shabbat dinners all over town, learning Torah under trees and in mountains and on bicycles and also in an Uber probably, who knows. Well, San Francisco is full of nascent Jewish leaders wanting space to lead. They need you to invest in them. And by invest, I do mean your time, your money, and your wisdom deployed strategically and diligently. First of all, they need you to invest in them as leaders. You as leader, them as leader. They need buttressing because they're lonely change agents. They see the sclerotic Jewish world as it is, and they often feel marginalized by organized Jewish life. They're far from the center of power. All that's true, but nothing stops them. They make this up. You think I'm making this up? Yoma 35. In the Gemara, in Masechet Yoma, talking about Yom Kippur, it's coming up, tells the story of the same guy I've been talking about, Hillel. He's a woodcutter. He makes no money. He takes half of what he earns in a day and he feeds his family, and it ain't much. You know what he does with the other half? I mean, get this. This is 2,000 years ago. He bribes the guy in the uniform who's guarding the door to the Beit Midrash, where all of the center of Jewish power is, doors like that. There's some dude in a uniform says, you can't come in here. You're not from here. Hillel's from Babylonia, and this is in Jerusalem. They say he can't come in, so he bribes the guy because he so desperately wants to be in where the wisdom is and where the leadership is and where the opportunity is. And then the day comes when he didn't make so much money and he only has enough to feed his family, and he can't get in. So what does he do? He doesn't give up. He's from San Francisco, from an ecosystem that says, we're going to find a way in. So you know what he does? The Gemara says he climbs up on the roof, and he looks in at the sunlight. Only it's a strange term, the sunlight, because it snowed that night, and he's freezing almost to death on the roof of the building. Talmud tells the story that the next morning they can't see the lights being blocked, and so they find this guy half frozen, half dead, and they go up and they get him and they bring, who's they? The two leaders, the most important leaders of the community. This Jew wants to be part of our community, wants to innovate, wants to push change. Who is this guy? Who knows? Let's go find him. They bring him down, they warm him up, they take care of him. It's a nice story. But you know what's cool to mention about this story? You know the leaders were? The two fellows that dug Hillel off the roof? Their names are less famous than Hillel, but Shmaya and Avtalion were the two leaders of that generation. Now, I don't know where you come from in the Jewish genealogy thing, but my kid's working on names for his unborn child, but Shmaya and Avtalion, those are unusual names. Like, is that a Litvish name? Is that where you're from? Those are not Jewish names. These two leaders of the Jewish community were Jews by choice. 2,000 years ago, you know, the Jews think that the notion of inclusion, the notion of fairness is an innovation of American liberal democracy. And when in fact it's a bedrock Jewish religious worldview, 2,000 years old, recorded on the pages of the Talmud. And so when someone with a beard tells you this is the way it is, or when someone tells you there's no room for you in this conversation, remind them about Shmaya and Avtalion. Don't let others, anybody, own tradition in a way that can be a weapon to lock you, if you're Hillel, out of the Beit Midrash. This story is a paradigm of the Jewish people, renewing itself. A lonely leader seeking to learn, to grow, to develop, who's nurtured and revived by the leaders of the prior generation. Yeah, money matters, but investing in the leaders who come to reimagine our Jewish world matters too. The need to warm them by the fire of your wisdom, to invest systematically in what is the most precious asset of the Jews, our human capital. I am not talking about leadership development programs. We have too many of these. They are well-intended, but they're kind of like job retraining programs from the government. You got to do them, but they don't work. Building Jewish leadership, imagine, act surprised that building Jewish leadership isn't an academic exercise in skill building. The men and women like Hillel who are drawn to lead and innovate need more from us than that. In the startup ecosystem here in San Francisco, disruptive leaders don't go to a program once a month in the evening in order to develop as leaders. They fight to earn a place on a leadership development platform where an entire resource cloud exists to educate them, challenge them, connect them, network them, provide them capacity building and mentorship, and bet on them. The whole world celebrates the generative energy venture capital unlocks here in San Francisco. And when that energy is unlocked, the change agent leaders that start up ecosystems that disrupt every industry on the earth. Okay, this is exactly the kind of platform building that nascent Jewish leaders have to get and don't from us. Even here in San Francisco, where if there's a more vibrant example of such an infrastructure, I don't know where it is on earth. In Israel, this kind of strategic platform building is fomenting social change leaders who are beginning to shine new light into the Jewish democracy. This notion of building a paradigm of leadership, inviting people from every corner, Haredi, ultra-Orthodox women, from Muslim Orthodox men, people with big kippahs, people with no kippahs, gay and lesbian, Ethiopian, Bedouin. What happened if you call a generation of leaders in the civic square in Israel, across sectors, business leaders, private sector people, non-government NGO leaders, and government? What if you invite them to a conversation that is not it's not mifgash, not an encounter. It's an action-oriented thing that says, who but you is going to be able to create the innovations that will make Israel a light unto the nations? Who but you? And they say, yeah, who but us? But will you resource us? Will you love us? Will you nurture us? Will you push us? And they are doing this. They are working together in health, in welfare, in education, in local municipal government to galvanize social change and drive Israel towards a worthy destiny rather than an ignominious fate. One of the leaders of your community said something to me this morning that has me rocking in the free world. He said to me, this is the generation that saw the state of Israel created, and it's no longer inconceivable that this is the generation that will think of that as a point in time, a historical reality that didn't endure. Not on my watch. Not on yours either. Some of those social change leaders are here. You'll see them on our panel this afternoon, and I hope when you listen to them, you can hear in their voices the stories of the transformations they're driving, but also the sound and the syntax of what it takes to be a transformative Jewish leader. The Valley builds better change agents systematically for industry. The Jewish community can and must do the same in San Francisco and throughout the Jewish world. So investing strategically for me means first investing in Jewish leaders in Israel and America, but to build the vision, building leaders is necessary but not sufficient. You have to be able to bet on their ideas. You have to be able to give them the tools that it takes to scale an idea. If you've never done it before, how do you do it? I worked for my dad for a lot of years. I say with truth, it's simple and so. I've had 3 creative ideas in my life. I get half credit for each of them, and my wife did most of the work anyways. At Timberland, I created a tremendous amount of value with his ideas. I couldn't cook up the craziness came out of my dad's head, but I could build it out. That was my skill. Jewish change agents in San Francisco need the same blend. They have passion, they have ideas, but how about capacity building? What are we doing to get them to the place they need to go? What does capacity building mean? It means 2 things. It's a lo taseh and aseh. There's a don't do and a do. There is a tremendous amount of philanthropy here that's donor-based as opposed to investment-based. Donor-based philanthropy is annual giving for problems that take a decade to solve. In accounting terms, that is a mismatch of time frame. In comes a CEO who says, I can change the world. It'll take me 10 years. And you say, here's the check. See you next week when we renew our conversation. And so CEOs, change agents, spend 50% of their time in your living room trying to get money. We laugh about the poor people who serve us in Congress, who get roughly 2 days out of their term to actually govern. They spend the whole time raising money to be reelected. We think that's crazy, but that's the same thing we do to change agents. We give them annual gifts as opposed to 4-year investments. We push them on questions of how much goes to overhead as opposed to what's the impact and outcome you're willing to sign up for. That's what donors do. That's not what investors do. You wouldn't do that with the startup companies you work with. Please, I urge you, think about a different framework of social investment. I'm skipping ahead because we're going to get, otherwise it's going to be time for Mariv. And so, that was very good. That was good. Now that wasn't so good, so we can skip that too. There's the thing about that. Okay, good, yeah. Let's go to the conclusion. What do you say? Okay. I got to bridge here a little bit. God, that worked hard. Anyways, when we all right, never mind. Let's call it a day. As the most important philanthropic leaders of San Francisco, the opportunity to build a better Jewish world stares us in the face. That's good. I needed something before I get to the conclusion. I go, dun, dun, psh. Okay, Elul is ending. The month of Elul is almost finished. Tishrei attends. Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance. The honoree mentioned Cheshbon HaNefesh, the time to account for one's souls. This is a unique time in the Jewish calendar when we're invited to unfetter our imagination and to reimagine ourselves and to reimagine our world. Can we build a Jewish world populated by literate and engaged Jews with diverse and distinct and rich points of view, united by a commitment to generative machloket, legit, authentic dispute, but for the sake of heaven? Can we have Jews who are in relationship to the Jewish people and to the land of Israel, Jews who value and love their birthright? What a silly set of questions. Of course we can. And of course we will, because you are the leaders of this generation, and we need no more power than here assembled. You will seek the leaders out, and you will invest in them systematically. You will continue to focus your philanthropy through generations, first inside the Jewish community and then strategically as investors of time and money for capacity and scale. You will, because only you can, and if you don't, the alternative is inconceivable. So I'll end up with a story. I hope I can pull this off. There was an old woman, and so everybody thinks, the Tim Allen's guys will say, and she lived in a shoe, but I'm not going to say that. There was an old woman, and she lived in San Francisco. And she lived in a hard neighborhood. Maybe it was the Tenderloin district, I don't know. She was an older woman, and she was alone, and she didn't have all the material things that some have, but she didn't see the world that way. She had what to say. Not herself, she wasn't an articulate person, but she had a songbird. And she had a plan. And her plan was simple. What she had to share, she wanted to share. And so her deal was simple. She put the bird in the window every day. And as people walked by, they saw the bird, and the bird sang, and life went on in San Francisco. There were young men in this neighborhood. There had to be men, right? One's name was Esav, the other one's name was Yishmael. One was named Yaakov, the other one was named Yitzhak. They came from a good family. They came from good families, but they were far from their families. They were disconnected from the value system that they were raised in. They didn't know what their birthright was worth. They weren't educated in the values and the morals that grounded the families that came before them. But they were Silicon Valley entrepreneurs, and so they were really offended by the worldview of this woman who said, I have what I have to share, and that's my purpose. My purpose is to build what Dr. King called the beloved community, and this bird is the way I do that. These entrepreneurs knew what to do about that. They hatched the plan. They took the bird. That wasn't the hard part of the plan. These were strategic thinkers. They took the bird, and they took the bird in their hands, and they stood in front of the woman, and they said to the old woman, is this bird alive or is it dead? Of course, if she said the bird was alive, they would just kill it in their hands and say, you lose twice. And if she said the bird is dead, they'd open their hands and the bird would fly away. They'd get her twice. They didn't want her bird. They wanted her hope. They didn't want her possessions. They wanted their worldview to prevail, the one that says it's dark and it can't be light. So they asked her, is the bird alive or is the bird dead? I ask you, will you own the responsibility to help educate my grandchild Jewishly? Day school is impossibly expensive. Hebrew school has never worked. Teachers are not trained or loved, and so who's going to figure that out? I had my swing at it. It didn't work. We spent $100 million of a family's wealth to try and make the day school system affordable and sustainable across the country, and it didn't work. It didn't fail, but it didn't work. And so I'm calling on a generation of people who are smarter than me. I want the Uber guy and the Airbnb guy and all those other things to figure out how to make Jewish education work, because I don't want the bird to die. Is the bird alive? Is the bird dead? Will you help me ensure that the world my grandchild grows up in is diverse, but open to his point of view, because it would break my heart to see my grandchild marginalized or hurt or shouted down the way we shout down dissension in the Jewish community these days. His parents will make sure he knows how to listen. You make sure that your child does too, because the public square isn't safe for Jewish dissent now, and it needs to be made safe again. Is the bird alive or is it dead? Come to Israel with me, please, and look with me at the beauty and the challenge, and help me, join me in helping to complete the return to Zion. Being there is not the end of the story. Woody Allen got it wrong always, but he said at least this much: it's only 90%. That last 10% is the difference between a light unto the nations and another shitty democracy. That last 10% matters, and I need your help. Will you be part of working hard to make Israel a Jewish democratic nation with respect for and commitment to the human rights of all its citizens, exactly as promised in the Megillat Ha'atzmaut? And will you help Israel make peace with its grudging neighbors? Is the bird alive or is the bird dead? Will you think about your own Jewish birthright and find what to rejoice in? For too many generations we've died as Jews. It's well enough time to live being Jews. Is the bird alive or is it dead? Who but you, the men and women who lead this community, have the will and the skill, the strength and the means to build this vision into reality? I ask you, like they asked her, old woman, is the bird alive or is it dead? And she looked them straight in the face, and I'm doing the same. And she said, I had my time. I don't know the answer to the question of is the bird alive or is it dead? But this much I do know. The answer's in your hands.